Hey guys, welcome back. Yeah, in this part we're starting going to go explore the unjust norms that hegemonic elites set forth. This is part of like what's wrong with society today. They largely have these norms just to make you miserable, so that when when they come calling, you answer, and they don't even have to come calling. Generally, you continuously call on them, hoping that they co-opt you or try to make yourself valuable. And this is exactly how they fool scientists into just in these races and making their science results public and putting them in papers like Elsevier and so on and etc. etc. Because everybody wants to not be miserable, and you are made to come calling to them and hope that they get you or something. Of course, there's the opposite. Like me, I was courted like 4 or 5 times, and the latest, like I said, it was 2022 for $20 million, and I refused. And yeah, so a few unjust norms. The first and foremost, and the easiest for them to implement, so on, was what I call the war on sex. Especially as a white male, as a white heterosexual male, it's virtually, especially if you're not like athletic, you're doing science and technology and not going to the gym, it's virtually in the Western world impossible to get sex, especially quality sex, right? So, what about norms? Well, first of all, the age of consent, right? This is another bullshit that's absolutely unnatural and invented. Yeah, it varies from state to state. So it's like 14 years old in Hungary, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, I think, and some European countries. 16 in the USA and most other European countries, including Romania, and 9 years old in the Arab world. In some Arab countries, there's no age of consent. 9 years old in some Arab countries, and so on. But the point is that there is this age of consent, and so basically, if you have sex with a girl who's younger than this age, regardless of what she looks like, you're gonna go to prison basically for life. Um, and the problem, of course, with this rule is that sexually attractive girls don't have an age written on them. For myself, and many people ask me times and again if I'm a pedophile. I'm not. Um, I mean, I would have sex with 14 years old, 15. I'm not looking at the age. I'm looking at is the girl sexually attractive, and that's a girl that has already reached sexual maturity, and basically I don't care about the age. In terms of taste, I will of course obey the law because I don't want to go to prison, um, and I have the ability to control myself and obey the law if I want to, and especially when I have to, right? But I'm not a pedophile. So it's not about necessarily the age. For me, the best age is like 19 to 21. So even 18 would be young enough. But that's not a problem. The problem is that uh, the most unfair is to the girls. But the problem is that a sexually attractive girl, you cannot tell if she's 13 or 23. Seriously. I've seen girls who are 13, 14 years old who are psychologically more sexually mature and, like body wise, like breast and hips, more developed than girls who are 22 years old, whom I also know. So there's absolutely no way. So you take a girl that's attractive, right? So I'm not saying that most young girls are not obviously young or older girls obviously older, but if you take the prototype of an attractive girl, it doesn't show her age. If it's from the core, puppy face, sexually attractive girl from I don't know 13, 14 until 23, 24, they're gonna be, yeah, it's in that range. You cannot say anything more. And of course, yeah, they use this so that de facto, if you're not affiliated with the elites or with the hegemons, you cannot have sex with attractive girls because they may be underage. And even if you try, I mean, like, it's a real cool off if the girl sees you so unconfident that, what, you're asking for ID, and what if she uses her sister's ID, right? Or an ID that doesn't have her picture, or an ID that's fake, or whatever. And yeah, you still have to convince her. That's another thing. And if she sees you this week, it's a problem. And the IDs, of course, are designed to have all sorts of things so that you don't show them, like a home address, full name, social number. You know. Okay, so age of consent is one thing. Then there's ban on prostitution, which is, I mean, that's we guys in science and technology. This is why we would give things to girls for sex, you know, and Yeah, it's forbidden in the Western world. By the way, both there were in the Soviet Union and in communist, except communist China is now a little bit hegemonically, pressured, but generally in communist societies, so think communist not as a dictatorship, but like libertarian, French Revolution kind of thing. There was no age of consent. So in the Soviet Union, it was onset of puberty, which depends on the person. So, but like if she's 12 or something, it's almost sure it is. So, yeah. And there's also no ban on prostitution. Like Western hegemons in the Soviet Union, there was no ban on prostitution. In the Soviet Union, they would say that, oh, they put girls in hospital if they did prostitution and so on. But of course, that's marginal, and that's maybe during later years when actually Gorbachev and the Westerners, were in control there. And one more thing, it wasn't like prevalent. I mean, even now in Russian society, I see it. I lived in Russia for quite a while, so maybe like up to 3 years or so. Um, they have a free sexuality there, an open sexuality. So by the way, if you guys in science and technology want to have, not paid sex, just go to Russia. They really like, smart, calm, and kind of like maladiets people there. And yeah, they want you for themselves. They enjoy you. They enjoy laying you and fucking you, and also you laying them. So, and there, by the way, in Russia, the culture is like if you're going on a second date with a guy, she, for her own benefit, will probably want to have sex with you. So, it's totally the opposite of Europe. They don't weaponize it, and they don't, like they find it a normal relationship of guys and girls. And there was, by the way, one situation in Moscow. It was not even in St. Petersburg. In Moscow, one girl was like topless on the window and getting, like laid from behind, and that's kind of normal. And yeah, in Russia, so it's more open sexuality. Of course, some of the Russian elites, some of them would rather also have this kind of Western system because they need more wealth and more power. But generally, the mentality is different there. So this is one core difference between, between the West and the free world, the mentality of the average man. And in Russia, it's much more open in these terms. So war on sex is one thing, and like age of consent and ban on age of consent and on prostitution is just one thing. There's a lot of other things. The bullshit thing with vulnerable parties that they made up in the UK and the Anglo-Saxon world. So right now, even if she's like over 18 or like over 24 or over whatever, if she's somewhat vulnerable, for example, if you're in a stereotype kind of setup, for example, if you're her teacher or professor, university professor, or I don't know, boss, or all of the things that the girl actually want to do, they want that power asymmetry, and because it's sexy, right? Well, first of all, and this is how you could get it, but it's of course bad. Um, and even if not, if she had the beer, I know people that were Romanians that went to Britain, and they just picked up a girl in a club. She wasn't drunk or anything, but then she asked for money because he laid her, and he didn't have because he was just working construction or something, and then she put him in prison. He did nothing wrong. He just had casual sex, and she said that she was incapacitated because of the alcohol, right? So bullshit, and lots of other things, and yeah. Let me see. Before I go on, just a relative ban on BDSM. So when you cause pain to the girl, which she might also enjoy, or a setup that's like domination, submission, or whipping, or caning, or spanking, or stuff like that. That's also not something that you can do very, very freely and carefree in the West. It's more like okay in Russia and in Eastern Europe, but I wouldn't be totally fine with it. I mean, not fearing any legal repercussions if I did it in the USA or UK, especially in the UK, right? What if you did it to a local, I don't know, small nobility girl, and then she says, "Give me money," or "I don't like it," or "Marry me," else how I put you in prison, right? And then she shows the marks. Look how he beat me with a cable, right? And there's all sorts of other bans regarding sex life and romance. Ban on polygamy, ban on polyamory. By the way, polyamory is really a good thing. So I really recommend it to everyone. It's like when you are with somebody and you can also be with more people, and that each of those girls can also be with more men. So it's like equality through equality, and it's not only through equality, but also depth in each relationship. So, but anyway, it's kind of like banned as well, or at least formally. and a whole bunch of other restrictions. I'm not even going to go into them. If you promise her marriage, of course, you're also going to jail and so on. These are precisely made so that you guys, especially in science and technologies, are left sexually wanting and unsatisfied, because this is one of the strongest motivants with which they can get you, to work and do research and so on for them. Um, it's not by chance. Another reason they do this is because they want society to be disconnected. So they don't want independent groups. They don't want independent nuclei and independent parties that compete with them for power, or you know that say, look, we're kind of like self-sufficient here, we don't need you. Yeah, so this they wanted everything in the West especially, and I even saw this in this guy in Andrew Science Speaks Tremendous, who led the delegation when they tried to co-opt me in Heidelberg in 2022. um, yeah, what basically they want to have full veto power and then to fully regulate the economy, right? So if you do something, and even social relationships. So if you do something with someone, they want to attach a cost thing to it. This is the Israeli model. So you want to lay that nice looking 13, 14-year-old girl? Oh, all the way. Just, we need this missile thing to fly all the way to Moscow, Do you think we can help with that? Well, it's even worse than that. You want that, and and they see that you can do the missile, and they come to you and say, "Yeah, look at the girl. Can you make this missile fly?" Right. So I'm not joking about it. This is how it goes. Um, yeah. So this sex and romanticism is one part of the thing. There's It's not the only one, and then there's this ongoing ban on independent development. It's also ban on living off the grid. So my maternal grandpa, built his house, 100 square meters, single story house made out of stone, brick and stone, so not wood or something cheap, in rural Romania, in a town actually, so it could be urban, but it's a small town, in 2 summers. So he was working during communist times as a full-time professor and adjunct director to a high school, the local high school. And in 1 summer, he built up the exterior of the house, the structure and the walls and the windows and so on. And in the other summer, he managed the interior, and also brought furniture and some stuff, And it had plumbing, it had electricity, and so on, right? And say, yeah, where does the electricity come from, right? Well, actually, there's a local what do you call it, hydrocentral, so a water-based power plant, a hydropower plant on the river in this small town, and we scientists and engineers could do that. And by the way, this is one example of a potentially self-sufficient community. So you have the hydropower, you have electricity, you have weapons and so on. You have natural resources, you have the mountains, you have grazing land. Basically, you wouldn't need to trade with anybody else. Anyway, so for you guys who are looking at the price of homes in California or so on and see, well, hundreds of millions, just know that the house, well, kind of like that, if it doesn't have a higher floor, and some people in that small town also build higher floors. There's a lot of like non-aligned Freemasons there, and they know how to build, how to make the design build. Not that AutoCAD couldn't do it for you now. Another thing of software and technology. Um, so it took him like 6 months to get it done. And people in Romania right now get credit for 35 years of full-time labor. So they pay like 400 or 500 euros a month to live in a matchbox, as we call them, in one of the flats in Bucharest. And you could build a whole house in 6 months. And my grandfather built it alone. His neighbors didn't really help. He got stone from the river. He did buy cement, but that's again something that's very low tech and it's really not complicated to do. And he used steel grids indeed. So, but he could have used like wooden grids instead of that. And he built this house in the 1960s, and my mother and his family lived there, and I lived there in childhood when I was going to, in vacations there. And I sold it like, I don't know, 2018 or 19. and it was in very good shape, and it bought out, and it's still there, right? So it's like those 100 years homes. It's lasts 2 3 generations, and it's 6 months. And it's even worse with how much you can make in if you handle agriculture. So my paternal grandparents, the other ones, well, they had a small plot of land. I don't know if they had a whole hectare or something, but it was not really lots of openings, so maybe like 30 40 meters of the street and then all the way back going. But without, they didn't earn anything. So during communist time, my grandpa worked a little bit as a bread maker, uh, but very modestly, right? Uh, and it was only for a couple of years. So otherwise than that, they didn't even have money. They didn't use money. They built their own. They grew their own food, and But yeah, it sounds like maybe pittoresque. But I want to stress something else. They had with this approach food for a family of three. Well, one child they sold to not sold but gave to adoption. Um, the younger sister in my father's family. But they had food for themselves, so one, two, and then for the children, so three, four, five. So for 5 people, and they're also like giving out to their neighbors once in a while. And by the way, this community was very much. They still kind of did like barter. So some people had cheese, some people had corn, some people had I don't know cherry, and they were like like bartering around. Um, so they had sufficient. And do you know how long they worked? So basically they had like during the high season of the time, so during spring and autumn, for about 1 month they had a strong agricultural labor. And they did things like they had all the neighbors come to them, and then they went to the neighbors, so they all finished all the labors in this month, without tractors, without basically with technology from 1,000 or 2,000 years ago from the Iron Age. They could do it from the Bronze Age as well. It's not that big of a difference. Um, During those high times, maybe they work like 6 hours a day, 2 months a year, and during the other times, maybe 1 or 2 hours end to end, maybe 3 hours. No, 2 hours, let's say, per day, working. But I wouldn't think even 2 hours. They were just waking up to give food to the birds, and let them out. I don't know, take the cows to the backyard to graze, and then in the evening they brought everything back and locked them up. That's basically a standard day. So that's all you do. And of course, the my grandma had to clean the house, like dust the floors, cook. But like even some software engineers, I know, like cooking is one of the highest ranking courses in Google, have to do that. So yeah, so this is the cost of life, dudes. 6 months to build a house, and it's about, I don't know, let's average it out to maybe 3 hours a day. Although I think that's a lot of labor to sustain yourself and the family of three. And I think that if like urban life offered you to work there, I think it should be offering you something on top of this. So um, definitely not something that you work harder and you get less, right? I mean, you could work harder. I don't contest that. It's in the countryside. They also did it. Like they built these barns. They were changing the fence because it was like fashion. Um, they did all sorts of things that you really didn't have to do. Like um, yeah. And we got water from the fountain. So later on, we had the hydrofor, so an electric system that just pumped out water. Um, yeah, but really, let this sink in. So 6 months to build a house, and 2 3 hours a day with low tech to to cover the standards of life. Oh, and by the way, these people didn't really get sick in their life. They went to hospital. My maternal grandpa, sorry, never went to hospital. Maybe he went once. He went once when he fell off a cherry tree to get a stitch, and he went once when he was very old for I'm not sure for what. But he was like 83 or 84 when he went to hospital for the first time. Really, seriously. My grandma, who lived to be 93, or 92, never went to hospital in her life. Never. Yeah. And she was on her feet until like 89, 1990 or so on. And my grandpa was until 88 or so. No, he died at 88, so he was like 33, 84. Um, yeah. So if you're thinking about all the benefits of urban life, yeah, sure, I don't contest them. With urban technology, they wouldn't have to work at all. They could automate all these tasks, and this is what happens in poultry farms, in meat farms, in systematized agriculture and so on. So yeah, but of course this is banned right now. So living off the grid is banned. And there's all sorts of regulations. They don't call it precise like this, but there's all sorts of regulations that ban it. For example, in Romania, you're not allowed to produce electricity except if you give it to the national grid. So if you put a water mill in your backyard and you put a light bulb to it, you're breaking the law and going to prison. In the US, it's somewhat even worse. If you collect rainwater, and I really saw YouTubes about this, they can arrest you in some states because you need authorization to collect rainwater. Right. So maybe if you take water from the fountain also. Yeah. And they're trying to do it with the air as well. So right now it's just for economic activity. So, you probably heard about the CO2 trading certificate schemes, pollution rights, and so on. So right now, if you want to set up a factory, for example, to build an industry, like make your own cars, airplanes, missiles, and so on, anywhere in Western world, you need to buy these carbon certificates so that you're allowed to pollute. And of course, they're going to be more efficient Western factories and so on. So you're really not going to be making it. But yeah, I wonder if you're going to need authorization to breathe later on, breathe air, in the Western world. And speaking of authorization, another type of unjust norms. So basically, you need authorization required for everything to do, on your own. So most importantly, like for all the things that are an absolute must of independent, non-aligned life. So hunting, fishing, collecting water, collecting wood, practicing medicine, practicing psychology. Even if you say, I'm not a doctor, I don't have a license as a doctor. I'm not a psychologist, I don't graduate psychology. No, there was even a case in Romania. They accused some guy that he manipulated women, and like Freud and what's the other guy, Jung. He also had sex with some of them, and then said, "Oh, you fooled them. You said you did." He didn't say he was a psychologist. You did psychological counseling to them, and you are not a psychologist. It's madness. Um, Going further down, so ban on developing and fielding your own weapons. So this relates to something very terrible, and basically, we scientists and engineers, because we spend more time, or part of it is because we spend more time thinking and doing research and studying. We're not like physically fit, and we generally don't like, and also we don't like getting into fist fights. And I myself won all my battles by calling the police, and I did win quite a few. I never ran away from one, but I never threw a punch in my whole life, which doesn't mean that I was not attacked or killed, and it's not a big deal either, by the way. But what the fuck? Police doesn't defend us. That's another thing I'm gonna get through. And then sometimes they do. Maybe if you're dead, they arrest the guy. So if he kills you, maybe they investigate and so on. But like preemption, they say, look, this guy is violent. He, gets in front of me when I try to speak with a girl. He pushed me. He hit me. He threatened to beat me and so on. No, police are not gonna do anything. And honestly, did you get it on camera? Did you, of course, if you're non-aligned, they're gonna ask these questions. If you're from the elites and they complain about you, they're just gonna pick you up and say, "Oh no, tell it to the judge." Tell it, you know. And there's also a ban on self-defense. So this is terrible, especially in the U.S. where you're allowed to have weapons, but you're not allowed to use them. In Europe, you're not even allowed to have weapons because people here, like for example in France, the regular people in France, they don't really obey the government, so they have free sex generally. There's also, girls who try to exploit the rules. They drink and drive and don't really have serious accidents and do a lot of other things. And if police comes, they generally, circle them. They make a circle, the people there, and they try to extract the person who's hunted by them, and then they push the police aside and fight with the police. And of course, if they come with gendarmerie and armed and so on, they cannot. They're overwhelmed. But they have this French model where they say that the government is afraid of the people in France, not the other way around, like everywhere else. And this is, of course, since the French Revolution and so on. But elsewhere, so except the USA, generally people are not allowed to have guns, and you're not even allowed to make it yourself. So I, as a scientist, I mean, look, if there's some bully guy in school or there's some, troublesome neighbor somewhere, I myself right now with these bare hands, I could make a model, an AI model, and even build with a Raspberry Pi a killer insect. I could make a killer drone. I don't even need to have access to. By the way, this is also controlled, like explosives, like needed to make a bullet, saltpeter, or there's black powder and so on. All the stuff that dynamite is made from. And actually, if you're curious about this, I even have a blog post. I exfiltrated ChatGPT about how to make explosives, but I really don't recommend that path. So it's useless. Don't go into that path of, I mean, yeah, just get weapons lawfully. And yeah, so you're not allowed even to make it yourself. So I, as a scientist, because I'm studying so on, so I'm not sturdy, I don't have muscle and so on. What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to defend myself? Oh, call the police. Yeah, but they don't intervene. They don't do it. At the very best, if they're not going to take you to hospital, say that you're a troublemaker. Rest in psychiatry for a while because you're a troublemaker. You don't get along with the others. Or, like corrupt teachers say in school, like you don't fit in, The others pick on you and you don't allow it and you don't fit in. And of course, the thing is that even as a child, I could invent weapons. I generally had very good schools and very good childhood. There was a situation in my third school or so, between the 7th and 8th grade. And there was a situation where they picked on a girl, and I really thought about bringing a weapon to school. And I thought about bringing a gun, and I said no. And then I thought about, even a knife does it, a kitchen knife. But, and I was absolutely right. They hit her with an apple, and, if I had intervened, they would have attacked and beaten me. So, this was by all means self-defense. And by the way, they were criminally liable. They were over 12 and they had criminal liability, and I think it was the 8th grade, so they were actually over 14. So they had full criminal liability. They should have went to prison for that. Of course they didn't. And they don't. And I think that everybody in the US is even worse than this. They talk about, surviving the public school system in the US. It wasn't this bad in Romania. It was actually pretty good most of the time, but this was mainly thanks to Soviet legacy. I don't know how good or bad it is now, but I think it's much worse. But then even on the streets, right? So there's this ban on self-defense. And of course, if you're one of the elites, then it's no ban. Then they were justified. They were in self-defense. And they also have other techniques, like, have a bodyguard, just err and kill you. Yeah, and maybe he gets trial, and maybe he gets, 6 years, and maybe he does 2 years, and he has pension and so on and everything. And he kills you. For example, if, like I said, if you and some, we call it in Romania, money-ready kid, argue, and maybe for the same girl or something, and he wants to kill you, just have the bodyguards around and say, look, you're going to do 2 years, but you're going to get $1 million. And then he kills you and said, well, I'm sorry, I overstepped, and then the corrupt judges and everything, sideline with him. Yeah, so this is another thing, and now that I got to it, I'm going to go through the other bans that are very quickly and talk about something else. So ban on weaponry, on self-defense. So basically, with weaponry in the US, I condemn mainly the rules of engagement. I mean, if somebody invades your home, you cannot even kill them lawfully in many states. You have to shout out, go, go, or whatever. And what if it's how do they call it, scout girl with candies? Well, I think if a scout girl with candies invades your fenced home, you should have the right to shoot her dead then and there. I mean, you don't have to argue about it. Oh, by the way, you know how they do it? I really researched it the other day. VIP protection. So you really don't need a gun to be dangerous. Actually, you can kill a man with your bare hands. I learned this in a massage section, sports massage session. There's a particular move with your hands, and if you approach a guy from behind, you can actually break their neck and kill them right there and there. You don't even need a knife. And by the way, if you somebody attacks you with a knife, the best strategy is just to run. Or actually, I have a better strategy, which is to, if the guy is not determined already, to deflate the conflict, de-escalate, and just make him change his mind about killing you. Because otherwise, the best defense and what they do to VIPs is just standoff, distance, which is another problem. I mean, why do they allow all these violent people and even children? I mean, destitute children who have no particular qualities. They're not going to be like scientists or engineers or drivers or anything even, you know. And of course, they want all the comforts and joys of being masters of the world, and they're going to do violence to get it. And yeah, they will eventually, maybe some of them end up in jail. But before then, they're gonna do it to you, and you're not allowed to kill them. You're not allowed to, go after them at home. So defend like humanity defend against the how they call it, the cave lion. We exterminated this species. It was a natural predator of humans, the cave lion. A pretty interesting cat, and we killed all of them because they were a threat to us. You're not allowed to do that. I mean, there's a debate if you should be allowed or not, but yeah. By the way, we also did it to the Neanderthals. So the Neanderthals were this hominid species that were the original inhabitants of Europe. And when white men came, and they were tall, these Neanderthals, and more fit, and so on, and stronger. So basically, we killed them all. The white species, we killed them all, the Neanderthals. And of course, we got a nice immunity system by interbreeding. So most likely, white men with Neanderthal women. But this should also be like a warning for all the brutes out there. I mean, guys, if it boils down to this, the Neanderthals are gone, the cave lion is gone, even the what they call it, the Mongol horde, with all their horses and all their mites, they're all dead. The Chinese dynasty and the Russians, they took revenge and they killed all of them. Nobody who was a descendant, and they even had this policy where Mongol officers were so-called forced to have a number of children with conquered worlds, with women from conquered worlds, so those children could be in the administration, so that those worlds would never rebel, like be mixed. And Russia and China also killed those. Those were outstanding. Yeah, maybe a few survived here and there, but like, yeah. So if you're guys like, especially like the ones that have it unjustly, favorable to you now, the kind of guys that go to gym and go to football yards and you know um, know that eventually you're gonna end up in jail, so you just make yourself at home with girls and so on, and feel free to like bump us, push us, or talk, break our conversation and so on. Well, just know that the cave lion is extinct. The Neanderthals are extinct, and the Mongol horde is also extinct. And yeah, so, and also like science and engineers, like I said, right now I can buy a Raspberry Pi and or another sort of like small CPU, and put it on I don't know, even a needle, with a good AI model, and take some, maybe even, I don't know if they're open source, but I mean, as a science engineer, I could make one of those self-stabilizer drones to fly. And there was actually a great demo from an entrepreneur here who did this. He made a wasp insect-like with a long needle in front, and he threw it in the air, and he showed how that wasp attacked and basically beheaded, how they call it, a mannequin that was standing next to him, and how it discerned between the mannequin and himself. So that was pretty strong, because if he got the algorithm wrong, the wasp would have killed him instead of the mannequin. So yeah, mannequin like they have in these clothes shops, right? So not a person. So yeah, we could do that, and if need be, like, just know who's the powerful person actually. Okay, so back to other things that the elites do on unjust norms. They ban all sorts of things that should really be one's personal business or a group of people's personal business. And besides sex life and romance, there's a lot of other things, especially things that go to high value added stuff. For example, access to experimental medicine, to herbal medicine, um, gene editing, editing the germline. For example, if you have some illness and you want your children not to have it, it's forbidden to edit the germline. Why? It's your business, right? Yeah, of course they say, but your children's gonna live in society. But screw society. I don't want him. I mean, if society accepts him to live with, it's society's fault, not his, right? Not mine. And ban on cloning, ban on grid of the grid living, and most importantly, this is really important. Ban on parallel economy. So anything that is parallel economy in the USA, they label as drug trade. It's true that they use many things in parallel economy. They use drugs as a currency. So don't even think about all the bad effects that drugs have. Think of it just like a $20 note or something. If you want somebody to clean your house or fix the roof, you pay them with 10 grams of cocaine instead of $20 notes. Um, but even if you don't use drugs as a currency or you don't have nothing to do with that, they don't allow it. So de facto, there's not even a law against it, but they're gonna go on something like tax evasion, unauthorized activity, criminal group, drug trade. So they're going to go to you after this. In fact, there's a guy called Ulbrich who made an online dark web website where you could trade anything. Of course, it was mostly used for drugs, and I think anything that's off control is also going to be used for criminality and for drugs. But anyway, they sentenced him to life in prison, and he was just recently pardoned by Trump. But yeah, so the ultimate thing that he did was bring this peer-to-peer trading platform out there that was sanitized, so you could actually have some level of confidence, like you have on Amazon, that you're gonna get what you ordered there, this rating system and so on. So yeah, so it's not allowed parallel economy, and this is terrible because officially they say, oh, it's just make it the name for yourself, fund a startup, start a business, and just do it, and nobody, you can have the whole world, 350 million people in the USA or 500 million in NAFTA to serve. Yeah, right. Not if you want to be independent and you know develop independently. Uh, right. There's also ban on commerce, especially prostitution and defense. Like you need license to be a bodyguard and so on. Of course, this is also violated by him, but yeah, still. And then yeah, there's these things which should really be a group's personal matter, and they ban it. Uh, I mean, even if you're not in a homeowners association in the U.S. where they have another rules, yeah, there's a problem. But before I go on, I want to say something else. All these norms that are unjust, don't think that the elites solve them by having a context where they don't have to break them. Well, they also have a context where they generally don't have to break them. Also, the norms are not like objective and clear and the same for all. So you're gonna have maximalistic interpretation of law against you, not only in courts but even way before that. When getting authorizations, when dealing with the police, when getting arrested, and waiting for trial for 2 5 years in jail, and when not getting civil compensation and so on, right? And with the elites, it's not even gonna get past the police because, of course, they're theirs. They put it there, like the New York Mafia put their goons in syndicates. They put their policemen there, right, in key positions and in prosecutor office and so on. Yeah, but ultimately, it's not only that they don't have probable cause or don't get caught or don't have to break these rules. They basically break them with impunity. Um, and I'm not gonna. I mean, okay, let's see how they break them with impunity. So I reckon with maximal, near certainty confidence, all the major families that I mentioned, Rothschild and the rest, Rockefeller, Soros, and so on, they have their livestock of sex slaves and household slaves. Yes, it's illegal. It's absolutely illegal. It's a terrible thing, also, but they do. Um, you can read the strategy report. I mean, like where they get them. They get them in conflict zones. They can even grow them. I even confirmed that Andrew Rosales speaks tremendous that they actually have deployed wombs, artificial wombs, so they can grow life forms like humans without a carrier or a surrogate mother. Which, by the way, they could just have them carry their child, and if she starts commenting, they could just exterminate her, kill her. So, um, so yeah, so they have this. This is the elites. This is the first echelon, and then the second echelon. I mean, guys, there's Epstein Island. There's not only the island. There's enterprises like Epstein's. There's Epstein. There's Puff Daddy. There's Bunga Bunga parties. There's you know, between Echelon One and Two. There's the semi-annual child hunt. You know, like real life Hunger Games movie in Belgium and Holland. It happens twice a year where they you know, have hunt children and do BDSM with them, basically rape them. Um, I don't know if they would consent otherwise, but and very few survive. So it's kind of like a real world Hunger Game. I don't know. I've never been there. I was taunted one for being, you know, explored for being invited there, but I refused. So um, yeah. Although I must agree, as a man, it's tempting. It's a lot of things are tempting. Doesn't mean you cannot get that kind of thing, you know, the right way. Anyway, so they have these things and they break them with impunity. And it even doesn't even get to the prosecutor. And when it does, the prosecutor shuts it down. And of course, you can say, oh no, but in the US, so many people got into trouble for Epstein and so on. No, not really. They didn't. Like, what? Andrew is. Prince Andrew, I mean, like, he's stripped of all his nobility titles, right? Um, I don't think that affects his life, not in the slightest. And what about, like, you know, the real people? So besides Epstein, who thought he would make it and he was actually killed in prison, unless they, you know, gave a pill that lowers the pulse and got him out. But I don't think so. I think he was actually killed there. Who got anything for it? Yeah, Bill Gates had to apologize in Congress, which, by the way, again says the norm. So these people, Rothschild and the rest, rule and not Gates. So even within these elites, there's a pecking order between them. Terrible, terrible. These people cannot live, you know, with independent other people. So it's horrible, right? Yeah, nothing happened to nobody, and not because of lack of evidence or something. Not because they, I don't know, they didn't know. Oh, and by the way, with Epstein itself, right? So many people would, you know, if you're looking at the media and so on, you might think the wrong thing about these kind of endeavors. I don't know about Puff Daddy, maybe it was somewhat different there, but about Epstein, for which I researched quite amply, it was just a mass prostitution ring with young girls, and most of them over 18, and definitely almost all over 16. Towards the end, maybe Epstein started to, like, you know, also contemplate with younger girls, like maybe 14, 16, and also he had this vision of building this slave city, so becoming one of the people that have, you know, livestock of sex slaves. And he wanted to have surrogate mothers and, you know, basically start up business this way. But he didn't get to that. He didn't get to that. So I think it was just a mass prostitution ring. And I think, and this is actually with their own materials. There was a Netflix documentary, if you watched it on Epstein, with their own material. I mean, the girls went there and they were, you know, recruited from many walks of life. Many were independent prostitutes. Some were, you know, via agency. Some had pimps. I think a very small percentage of them were trafficked. So, like, you know, what you call, like, having someone and says you go to that party and you please those men. Most of them, no. And yeah, so it was just a massive prostitution. And I see nothing wrong with it. These kind of things should be legal. Only it should be us science and engineers that have the money to pay and do these things. Not those politicians. Or not, at least not them as well. You know? Not only them, you know? Yeah. Um, I'm very much against rape and I'm against slavery for sure. I'm not against prostitution. I'm not against child prostitution. Um, Yeah, definitely not against it. It's something that can make you wealthy if you as a girl start that at a young age, wherever is legally allowed, 14, 16, whatever, and you do it wisely, you can have 10 million by the time you're 24, and then you can, have a kids or kids with whomever you want. You don't even have to marry. you know you don't have to marry. You can be with some guy or not marry him. you know or other guys, you live in hotels and so on. So this is the terrible life from which these norms that prohibit free sex and free sex trade, like brave snake saves fish from drowning. This is what they do. Of course, what I wanted to emphasize with this later part of the speech is that these unjust norms do not apply to the elites. And also, they do not apply to the mafia because, well, the mafia doesn't respect the law generally. And neither do their goons and acolytes. So, if you're with the elites, like, if you win the Nobel Prize in physics, in whatever, you get a trip to Epstein Island. This is how it works. And Epstein himself actually talked about this in that documentary. So, yeah. But of course, it's all mediated by these hegemonic elites. They decide who gets it, who doesn't, and so on. And by the way, this Epstein is not first echelon kind of thing. It's like second, third, like bunga bunga parties with Berlusconi and so on. It's everywhere. It's even in Romania. They have a thing at the Cotroceni Palace. The yearly thing is not at the Sânziene or something. I'm not even sure. I don't remember exactly how it's called. But it's also only if you're in their group and so on. And they have kind of like similar to the White House dinner thing where girls walk all around you, and if you want, you can take one to the room. And actually, I don't know exactly how it works in Cotroceni because I never was there, but this is how I heard it works with the White House things, at least with some presidents back. So okay, so basically these are rules that are imposed on the others, and I mean the most terrible, horrible, repugnant thing is that if you ban and this is again on sex, but this is it. If you ban consensual sex between people, and if you punish it terribly, so it's like if the girl is in Romania, if she's 15 and 11 months, and you happen to, I don't know, buy her a car or something, you probably get 15 years in jail. So if you're like 24, 26, you're done. Your life is gone, right? And if you tell young kids, especially young boys, but also young girls, that, well, sex equals rape, and the only way you can get sex were supposedly in their minds if you break the law, then people are going to want to, be above the law and say, well, sex is rape, right? They're not going to care. And this is a terrible, horrible, I know, educational, and it's even a crime against humanity. I mean, you're conditioning young men and young boys that it's basically the same if you have sex with someone consensual or if you rape them. This is a crime. This is a crime to educate people this way. And yeah, so that's kind of about it. And of course, they don't have it. Oh, and by the way, I was at this elite party when I was 8th to ninth grade at the Giga Palace in Bucharest, and this was with children of the elites and so on, and with the elites and children of the elites. So I spent some time with the kids table, and they were very open sexually, and they, children of the elites start their sex life as soon as they become sexually active. There was actually a girl that was preschool, so she was, I don't know, I say 5, maybe she was 6, 7, I don't know. I was talking with some of the guys about BDSM, and she said, "Oh, how is that?" I said, "Oh, you'll know when you grow older." I said, "What? You're talking about BDSM, right?" And yeah, Victor is pretty cool on this one. Some guy, some name, maybe he was not Victor. And yeah, so this is how it goes. And they also told me, look, if you're with us, you can also do it. You can also, nobody's gonna pick on you for having sex. And they even gave me the phone number of somebody. And if somebody says something to you, show them in your phone this phone number. And by the way, police actually asked me for my phone once to check for that number. And because in a different context, but still, it's the phone number of one of the guys who is owner in Romania. So the guy who talks to the Americans and is backed by the American forces, and the guy who is the son of the guy who was at the Colored Revolution in 1989 and so on. So yeah, so this is how it works. The elites and the radicalized, these rules don't apply to them. And you couldn't make them apply. And if something happens, they're not gonna be. There's gonna be a a scapegoat or someone like Epstein that's gonna take the fall and so on. And yeah. Okay, so for this part, we still have like just 10 minutes. So another thing on unjust rules. Like rules that on paper sound like a good idea, but they're not, or the way they're enacted, it's not. Mainly about authorization. So um, you could say, okay, off the grid is forbidden, and no. But what about if I'm independent within the system, right? Within a state, within a country? Actually, you can't do that either. So um, from city planning, the biggest problem with cities is they're not planned to be defensive, right? So to have standoff distance against the bad guys. And for example, why do people don't need residence permits to be in cities? In the hometown of my grandparents, basically everybody knew each other, and this is one of the reasons it was so peaceful. By the way, another place which is very very peaceful, and people, it's also because of culture and how people know each other, and also because they have sex. It's Armenia. It's really peaceful there. If you guys lived in the USA and you visit Armenia, you're gonna think it's a different world. It's yeah. Anyway, so there are all these like the cities are designed basically without care, without emergently, you know, and elites live in these rural palaces, or they five-star hotels, or even in the cities, that with fenced properties and communities. I was in Russia in one of these. It's pretty cool, you know. They have their guards, and they have, like I had in Venezuela. I was once a guest of the Venezuelan government in 2020, and I had like 25 people, a group, armed with machine guns and anti-tank weapons and all sorts of toys, just standing ready for me. So when I was walking out the street, I had like escort. There were two guys with machine guns with me, actually a guy and a girl. And in case anything happened, they were like in 20 seconds. There were 25 armed people ready, and this is how the elites have it, and they have it also in the cities and so on. So I mean, just try for a fact. Just try to walk to Russell's house. By the way, do you know where Russell's house is? I don't know. Maybe I could find out, but I don't care about that. Assassinations, and this is not my way. You know, a man has to be destroyed first from a perception. It's then his physical life or death is not even relevant anymore. But like, yeah, just go to their neighborhoods. Can you? I don't think so. Well, while you live in the more unsecure places, and of course they have this thing. They say, in case you're attacked, just cooperate, right? No, do the opposite. Don't cooperate. I mean, use wise judgment. If your life is in danger, yeah, don't cooperate. But else how? Oppose resistance. This will actually even start deterring attacks. Yeah, if you're in the US and you're gunned down with a machine gun, I don't know, maybe cooperate or not, I don't know. But like in Europe, if some guy just, give me your money, give me your wallet, or pushes you, yell, scream, fight, call the police, ask for help. No, don't just let them. The way they say, the reason they say to just cooperate is because they don't want people taking justice or power or, into their own hands, one thing. And secondly, they don't want you to miss your next work day. They want you at work tomorrow. They don't want, oh, this criminal activity disrupted, the deadline for the project. No. And then they say, oh, we'll get them or whatever. And those they get, those they don't, they don't. So, yeah. And now back to other in-app norms. They're even talking about AI governance. So the AI models, like the early versions of ChatGPT, which was good. Right now it's all blacked out. They're actually based on open source data, so they don't have classified data. In principle, you could look it up online and reach it, but of course they like control Google when they sold to the German. They put the Schmidt CEO or something. So you have to know where to look. But they have AI governance. What the fuck? Of course, it doesn't apply to them. So think of it this way: to the elites and their models. What else? CO2 certificates, pollution limits, barriers to entries of certain markets, like labeling laws, like production certificates. A lot of people in rural Romania want to sell wine. They have lots of wine, lots of quality organic foods, and they cannot sell them because if they had to get the authorization and pay taxes for it, they would have to have a lot of land and a lot of, you know, to sell a lot to just cover the taxes, right? So they can't really, and this is why I have junk food in Romania, absolutely junk. And if you and in Europe in general, if you don't think so, just eat out in Russia or so. And if you can't get to Russia or you don't want to, just try Kazakhstan maybe, or Georgia, Armenia. Yeah. Okay. Okay. The final rule that I'm gonna touch upon here is these so-called special rights and protections for the vulnerable, for the minorities, and which is actually positive discrimination in the best cases, and in most cases, especially in the context of war on sex, it's just like imagine a dog with a plate with those plates that says "Don't feed me." So girls, by the way, if you wonder why your child, you want to have children, nobody wants to do that with you, or you wonder where all the good men are or why they're not around you, besides your bad strategy and that way, most of it is because of these rules that you may think that, oh, they gave me so many rights, but no, because they make men subject to the whim of other men, of the ones who have the power to enact or not those rules, to enforce them or not. So yeah. But I don't know, minorities, sexual minorities, immigrants, the poor, you know, if you want to trade with them, it's basically forbidden because only the elites are allowed to trade with them. And if you try to trade with them, it's exploitation, slavery, and again, you go to jail for 15 years at the very best. Actually, it happened. A guy had this very predatory scheme of next pay loans. Basically, it was very high interest loans, but there was nothing fraudulent about it. And they put him to life in prison for fraud. Just for picking on the poor and defenseless or vulnerable. By the way, I don't think it was a good business. I don't think it was something nice of him. But this is just printing the money. Then, if you as a poor person want to sell sex, if you as a poor person want to fix somebody's roof, and so on and so on and so on, so on, find a way out of poverty, or lie with somebody, or introduce your daughter to someone who's rich but not in the elites, like intermediate. No, that's, you go to jail for life, basically, in the USA at least. In Eastern Europe, it's more lax, but just because of enforcement, a lack of enforcement, not mainly, and mentality, not because they wouldn't want it to be that way. So, yeah. Okay, so this is the second part. I'm gonna end this part on unjust rules. I just touched a little bit of what is there. I'm gonna continue in the next part with finishing this on unjust rules, especially on the fact that you cannot play nice and say, okay, so you cannot be independent, you cannot but can you do something within these rules or become one that's allowed to break them? And the answer is again no. So no, there's no path that you can have and say, there's paths to some rule breaking. I mean, you'll be allowed, which is again a terrible thing, to have maybe, I don't know, free sex, and if you're already a billionaire, you're gonna be allowed to keep your money, and you're not gonna pay for living costs at all. But basically, if you want to be, to actually do something independently and self-develop, you cannot just have your small corner of the state, or not even if you're not in a territory, and say, okay, I want to obey by just and normal rules. I'll play along. I'll even pay tax. I'll have 50% of what I do, or 10% or whatever. Just leave me alone. No, it's not. It's not allowed. So this is one of the core injustices. Okay, see you right away in the next part.